Good morning, folks. Welcome to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Shroyer, your host, and today we're in Saline County at the Land Institute. Now, at the Land Institute, they're doing things just a little bit different than traditional farmers. They're looking at making our annual crops perennial crops. So stay with us. I think you're going to enjoy this interesting topic today, so we'll be right back. Thank you.
Closed captioning brought to you by Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff Progress, powered by Kansas farmers.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities, big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Good morning, folks. Welcome to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Shroyer, your host, and we're in luck because today we're in Saline County and we're at the Land Institute. And now the Land Institute's been here for a while, and it's kind of had an interesting history over time. And today we have Stan Cox with us, Dr. Stan Cox. He is the director or coordinator of research here at the Land Institute. So Stan, thanks for being with us this morning. I appreciate you taking the time and kind of tell us the history of the Land Institute and the goals, missions of it.
Well, the Land Institute started on just across the road here in '76, and it kind of grew out of the environmental movement of the '70s, trying to develop a more sustainable society. And as time went in the following few years, they were doing a lot of studies of the native prairie and looking at the ecological functions of it, and started wondering, would it be possible to develop an agriculture that had those same ecological functions, but unlike the prairie, could produce food that's edible by us. The prairie can produce food for cattle, but
and we eventually eat unless we're vegetarians, right?
Yeah,
okay.
right. But could you have a grain producing type of
System.
Agriculture that that would conserve water, prevent soil erosion, could get rained on as much as it could and still not experience erosion. Finally, in just after 2001, we started developing breeding programs to develop perennial versions of our familiar grain and grain legume crops, because
When we're talking wheat, of course, the wheat state, and then grain sorghum.
Yeah.
And what other
and
legumes?
Sunflower, and then some native species that might be domesticated. Because if you're going to have the functions of the prairie, you're going to need perennial plants.
Right.
Because the prairie obviously is 100% composed of perennial plants, and not just grasses, but legumes, plants of the sunflower family, and many other types of plants.
So we're talking about making our crops perennials instead of annuals.
Yeah, so for the past dozen years or so, we've been taking two different approaches to developing perennial crops. Either taking a plant like wheat, which has species related to it that are perennial,
right,
and making those crosses, or taking wild or other perennial species and domesticating them, just like our ancestors 10,000 years ago domesticated wheat and barley.
So Stan, tell me a little bit about your background, your academic background.
Well, I got my PhD in plant breeding at Iowa State, and then I was in Manhattan on the K-State campus working with USDA as a wheat geneticist for 13 years. And since then, I've been here working, and my work now is mainly on perennial sorghum.
Okay. Well, Stan, thanks you for that little introduction to the Land Institute, and stay with us because we're going to be talking to you and some of your staff here in a little bit. And you folks at home, stay with us as well. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Thank you.
American innovation is being driven in places you might not expect. by people like Brent Hayek, an Oklahoma family farmer, who recently set a world land speed record in a Ford Super Duty pickup truck powered by renewable B20 biodiesel. Advanced performance is here, now, putting America on the fast track to more jobs and energy independence. Biodiesel, America's advanced biofuel.
Tallgrass Commodities offers producers bulk commodities at a reasonable price with reliable service throughout the whole Midwest. To find out more about Tallgrass Commodities, visit tallgrass.us or call 785-494-8484. That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities, big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Shroyer, and we're at the Land Institute near Saline, and we have Dr. Stan Cox with us. And Stan is going to tell us a little bit about this, what I would say just a regular old grain sorghum nursery, but there's a little bit of a twist here. So Stan, tell us a little bit about this grain sorghum nursery.
Well, unlike most grain sorghum breeding nurseries that you'd see, here we're working on developing perennial sorghum. And the only way that sorghum, which is a tropical crop, the only way that it can survive the Kansas winter and come back the next spring is underground, which means developing underground stems called rhizomes. And sorghum happens to have a very close relative in the plant world called sorghum halopense, or popularly known as Johnson grass,
Exactly.
which has rhizomes. And so we're not trying to develop a plant like Johnson grass.
Yeah, we've got
may,
plenty of that,
yeah.
especially in the southern part of the state, right?
Yeah, and it may make a single plant, 8 pounds of rhizomes stretching out feet away from the plant in one season. We're not wanting that, but we can get a kind of a scaled down version.
Okay. So yeah, show us what the difference would be in a perennial sorghum, which you have right here.
Well, here's a rhizome. I dug this plant up
Just a while ago.
Yeah, just a while ago. And so here's a rhizome, and then
coming here.
a little one coming there, and you can see ones underneath. Now, this plant.
And this is a typical sorghum size.
Right, they're not excessively tall, and here we've got rhizomes going down. Now that's what we need. One that's going to come up in the fall does us no good. That's a suicide shoot there.
Right, it's not going to make it.
Right, but if, and I broke this one off and I dug it out, but when these rhizomes get a few inches down below the soil surface, then they can avoid freezing and produce a sprout that comes back the next year.
Okay, so tell me in a way that I can understand how you get a Johnson grass type. How do you get us a perennial sorghum? Because we got chromosome differences here, numbers, and that sort of thing. So, kind of take us through how you do that.
Yeah, it's a little tricky crossing grain sorghum with Johnson grass, because Johnson grass has 40 chromosomes in each cell and sorghum has 20. But there are two ways you can do it. One is to use a chemical called colchicine.
It's a nasty one.
Yeah, but if you use precautions, it's natural, derived from the lily plant, but you apply it and you can double the chromosome number of sorghum. But the other way, which works very well, is that sorghum sometimes has, in producing the egg cells that participate in pollination, there's a little slippage there, and it'll produce egg cells that have double their normal number of chromosomes.
Okay. During meiosis or mitosis?
During meiosis, and so they can unite easily with the pollen from Johnson grass, and then we produce populations
you're
like
off to the
this.
races. Stan, I want you to hang on, because we have to have a break right here. And folks, stay with us. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsor.
This hog is Hanover hoof for meal made from U.S. soybeans. Now, one hog isn't that impressive, but suppose we add another, and another, and another. Before long, you've got billions of hungry customers around the world all clamoring for the same thing. Our soybeans. Learn more about the billion-dollar appetite of animal agriculture at beyondtheelevator.com. Brought to you by America's soybean farmers and their checkoff.
Hello friends, I'm Ernie Rodina.
And I'm Dawn Dawson with the Better Horses Radio Show.
For over 9 years, we've been bringing the Better Horses Radio Show to markets all across the Midwest. We talk about God, lots about horses.
We talk about cows, we talk about horse health, we talk to top trainers, and we even talk about Roy Rogers.
We're having a blast with Better Horses Radio Show and would love to take it to a market near you.
So visit our website at betterhorsesradio.com and let us or your local radio station know you'd like to hear it in your area.
The Better Horses Radio Show is unbelievable.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities, big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. We're here at the Land Institute with Dr. Stan Cox, and Stan, we're standing in a kind of an unusual nursery here. It kind of looks like wheat, but it doesn't. So talk to us a little bit about your perennial wheat and your intermediate wheatgrass program.
That's right, Jim. This is intermediate wheat grass, or the grain-producing version of it we call Kernza now. We've got, in the small grains world of perennials, we've got two kind of parallel tracks. One of them is to turn this forage grass into a grain crop simply through selection in the field, genetic improvement. The other involves crosses between Kernza and regular annual wheat, Kansas wheat varieties, other wheats, making crosses between them to try to combine the yield and seed characteristics of wheat with the perenniality of this plant, which is a very strong, hardy perennial.
Okay, so this one is, this Kernza is basically a forage, intermediate wheatgrass. How hard is it to make this more of a grain producer as opposed to a forage producer? What goes into that process?
Well, the methodology we've been using, and Lee DeHaan is our Kernza breeder, it's been pretty straightforward. He'll grow out, each of these clumps here is one plant. You can split a clump apart so you have the plant represented more than once in a field. And he'll grow out, these days he's growing out maybe 15,000 of these in an evaluation nursery, getting data on all kinds of stuff, but yield per head is one of the main traits.
Right.
He selects out of those 15,000, maybe the best 0.5% or something, brings them to another nursery or in the greenhouse. They interpollinates them and uses that seed to plant another big nursery and select again. So it's a rapid turnover thing. And the plants, the best grain producing plants at this point are almost look like a different species from the forage type intermediate wheatgrass.
So it's been domesticated.
Well, you can see the analogy with wheat. They tend to be shorter, thicker strawed, fewer tillers, larger heads, larger seed. It kind of shows you what our ancestors 10,000 years ago did in a much less well-organized way to domesticate annual wheat. Lee is doing the same thing with Kernza.
Interesting. Thank you, Stan. We're going to have to, don't go away. You don't get off this easy. Okay, hang on. So folks, stay with us. We'll be right back after these words.
Tar Waters has what you need for all seasons for around the farm and home. Working, hunting, growing, feeding, snow removal, even fun for the kids. And a service department with experienced techs to help keep your equipment in top running condition. Tar Waters has a huge selection and the best prices. Tar Water Farm and Home, family owned and operated since 1978. They have what you need.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
Soil is the life of a farm, and for 25 years, SureCrop Liquid Crop Nutrition has helped growers produce abundant quality crops while preserving and improving the soils they steward. SureCrop offers complete soil and plant analysis with cropping recommendations, delivery direct to your on-farm storage, and quality crop nutrition custom blended for your field. Choose SureCrop for the assurance of excellence for your soil. Call today or visit their website for more information.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities, big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Shroyer, your host, and today we're at the Land Institute and we have Tim Cruz, a plant ecologist, and he's also Director of Research here at the Land Institute. So Tim, tell us what we have right here. Where are we standing in?
Well, we have a biculture, we call it, a combination of Kernza, the intermediate wheatgrass grain we're developing, and it's intercropped with alfalfa.
Okay. So why are you doing that? Why are you, I know being a plant ecologist where we're going with this, but why are you doing this?
Yeah. Well, annual grain agriculture right now is vulnerable to soil erosion. It can leak nutrients. We know there's phosphorus showing up in water bodies around Kansas. It, at certain times of the year, will invite insect pests or weeds. We need to control those.
Sure.
And yet, when we go out and we look at the native prairie, the rule, there are exceptions, but the rule is that it doesn't have these shortcomings.
Right.
And we ask ourselves why. And there's two broad reasons. One is the prairie is perennial.
Right.
And the other is that it's diverse. It has a lot of different plant species growing together. That can deter pests, it can slow down disease spread, it can have many different functions, but one of the functions of diversity in the prairie is the ability to capture nitrogen by legumes, the plant family that includes alfalfa and peas and beans and locust trees.
Sure.
And so we're working to try in a very simple fashion at the beginning to see if a couple of our crop species can coexist with legumes. One, do they compete heavily or can they get along over time? And secondly, can we see evidence of nitrogen being fixed or acquired from the atmosphere by legumes,
right,
and then transferred to the grain? So when we harvested the Kernza back in July, it was yay high,
okay,
and it had totally suppressed the alfalfa.
Right.
I mean, you couldn't hardly even see it in here. Right. But then after we cut the Kernza, the alfalfa took off, and now it's fixing a lot of nitrogen and putting it into the soil, and then we expect to see that via what are called isotopes of nitrogen show up in the Kernza next year.
So you'll know where that nitrogen came from, whether it came from the soil or whether it was fixed by the legumes.
Exactly.
Now, will you, I'm thinking forages here.
Yeah.
Now, after the Kernza's gone here and the alfalfa's coming back, here we are late in the season,
mm-hmm,
and will this be taken as a forage after frost, or what?
Right now this is a small experimental plot, but we are planning experiments where we will have a legume Kernza combination that we will graze, and we envision that this will provide an excellent forage at the end or the beginning of the season.
Or even maybe next year.
Exactly,
possibly.
exactly.
Tim, hey, I appreciate it. This is really kind of interesting how Kernza and some of the other perennial crops that you guys are working on here will fit into this kind of prairie-scape agriculture.
Yeah. Well,
so Tim, thank you.
Thank you for your interest.
Folks, stay with us. We'll be right back after these words.
Valley Vet Supply is devoted to providing information and professional quality products at reasonable prices.
Valley Vet Supply.
This is the fast track to more jobs and America's energy independence. Advanced performance is here, now. Biodiesel, America's advanced biofuel.
Buying a car shouldn't be this hard. And at Brown Chevrolet Buick in Wamego, it isn't. It's actually awesome. Whether you want a new or used car or truck, Toby's team can make the deal. Even if you want to custom order a new car or truck, Toby's team can make the deal. See Toby's team at Brown Chevrolet Buick in Wamego. We're awesome. That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Shroyer, and we're at the Land Institute. We have Dr. Stan Cox with us. And Stan, in this final segment here, kind of tell us how the perennial grain sorghum, how the perennial wheat and the Kernza program, how do you see that going to fit into a typical farmer?
Well, first I should say they're going to be, for most of these crops, quite a few years, decades of breeding before they're going to be equivalent to the kind of annual crops we have now.
The traditional crops, right.
But in the meantime, Lee DeHaan, our Kernza breeder, has kind of looked around, and he sees that for an initially getting into farms, that the bar is pretty low for what you might call alternative or specialty crops. He figures 1,000 pounds an acre is, if you look at wild rice, quinoa, some of these things. Now that's not what we're aiming for these to be, but initially, especially on land that's more erodible, that might be where the first toehold comes. But what we're aiming at, though, is to be standard crops that eventually on the farms of the future that people will grow as a matter of course.
You know, when you think about the nutrients, the seed you have to buy, I mean, it's not a crop that you're never going to have to touch again. You're going to have to handle somewhat like you do traditional crops, right?
Right, yeah, as you know, a crop isn't going to grow with no moisture or no nutrients or deficient nutrients. You're not going to get high yields. We're working on various ways of trying to address those, and one thing is for sure, just like with, say, wheat varieties, the breeders of perennial crops are going to have to pay close attention to disease and insect resistance, grain quality, and all the traits. They can't just simply say, okay, we've got a perennial crop and it yields 1,000 pounds, then we're done.
Right. Well, Stan, we're standing in a field of Kernza, this 5-year stand. What can Kernza grain be used for?
Well, we've done a lot of work with millers and bakers on this, and it can be used in making just about anything that wheat is used to make. Now, for a loaf of raised bread, you need about a 50-50 blend with wheat flour, but for other products like that you would make with soft wheat, for example, straight Kernza works for those.
Like cookies, muffins, that sort of thing. Well, Stan, hey, thanks for talking to us about the Land Institute and the interesting work that you're doing here, because this is down the road 20, 30 years. This may be more of a standard practice. So thank you, Stan, for sharing with us.
Thank you, Jim.
Folks, stay with us next week, because we're going to be back at this same time with That's My Farm. We'll see you next week.
Closed captioning brought to you by Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff Progress, powered by Kansas farmers.